a Strategy Simplified. Today, we're taking you behind the scenes of a black belt training. So first off, what is black belt? You're probably asking. Well, it's a consulting prep program combining 8 hours of one-on-one coaching, resume and cover letter edits, digital resources, and group training. Each month through the summer, we host a cohort that kicks off with a live, private, exclusive black belt group training. And this episode, we're sharing a tidbit from July's training. In the training, Jenny Ray LaRue shares an overview of the consulting interview process and covers case interviews in more detail, how to prepare what you need to know. So enjoy this short clip, and we'd love to have you join the next cohort of Black Belt, which starts August 10th. Learn more at the link in the show notes.
Inside your interviews, your case interview will be 95% of your first round score. You cannot dazzle them with your personality without passing the case, okay? You can, however, fail the first round if you don't have fit interview questions prepared, you're super waffly, or you say something like really off, right? Something super negative, something like in one of my conversations, somebody said something like incredibly racist. And I was like, oh my God, And so like, even though they did an amazing job inside their case interview, like obviously we couldn't take them on. So inside your fit interview, you just want to have like a little bit of practice for it, but really the first round is about your case interview. In the second round, it's actually a majority is on the fit interview, because at that point they assume everybody passed the case, right? So you have a harder case interview to help them differentiate between people, but actually the majority of your scoring in the second round is on fit. And I think a lot of people also don't know that. So they case after the first round, rather than moving their performance over to the fit interview. We are trying to prepare you before your first round for the second round interview, so that you don't have to spend a lot of your time between rounds working on case, and you can actually focus that time on the fit instead. McKinsey has what is called a command and control style case. Their cases are around 40 pages long. They're created by a central group. The person who gives it to you did not work on the case. There's no outside context they can give you. They cannot refer to anything. What they have is what you get. They will lead you through each piece of the case. And I recommend that everybody start, unless you know that you will not interview with McKinsey or do any command and control style cases at McKinsey or at KPMG or at let's see here, who else would use these? Carney. If you're not going to interview with any of those firms, then you can go directly to a Bain or a BCG style. But if you think you might, then I recommend starting with McKinsey, because McKinsey walks you through what they expect a candidate should do, and they lead you to each of those pieces without you having a lot of agency in between. I think McKinsey cases are the easiest cases with the hardest math. Okay, so McKinsey cases also help you train on the math, but you can't get lost inside the case. Flip over to the right side of their BCG. Like, these cases are super hard because you have to not just identify what the problem is and what a structure is, but you have to figure out what data specifically to ask for to get it from them. And you can get very, very lost in a BCG case. Prepping for McKinsey cases can actually begin to help prepare you for BCG cases, because it builds some of the muscle memory of like, oh, after we did this, then the next thing to do is this thing. That's what McKinsey takes me toward. That's kind of what BCG would expect as well. Bain is a little bit of a mixture. Bain cases are written more like McKinsey cases. Some people at Bain write their own cases. Some people use central cases. More are using central cases this year than ever before. At BCG, everybody writes their own cases. At McKinsey, nobody writes their own cases. Okay. And so for Bain in particular, it's like a choose your own adventure. The case will have usually 4 to 6 parts. As you go through it, when you ask for the part that you need, they will give you that part, but it could be in a different order inside the case. Whereas for McKinsey is like parts 1 through 6, and you do them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bain is 1 through 6, but you could do 1 and then 3 and then 2 and then 4, right? And kind of in a different order. Again, you can do 20 cases McKinsey style and get a really great baseline for casing, and then only then move on to the other firms. So McKinsey is our preferred way. And inside your coaching sessions, even if your coaches are BCG coaches, you want to tell them that you want to do more of a command and control style case starting at the very beginning. Case interview rounds, really round 0 is phone or market sizing and simple questions. If you get this, it's largely because you're doing a screening interview with a recruiter or you're going through a non-traditional process. For those of you that are at target schools, you will not have a round 0. Round 1A is also usually pre the first interview. The digital assessment is a bottom 5% filter. So what I mean by that is that they're not looking for your score on the digital assessment. They're looking to make sure you don't fail the digital assessment, right? It's one in some places used as an English language competency. In others, it's a speed test. So usually your main job for the digital assessment is to finish it. A lot of people really focus on getting the answers right, but finishing it is actually in many situations more important. Round 1B, which everybody will have, is usually 2 interviews of 30 minutes each. They almost always this year, everywhere geographically, will be on Zoom. And then round 2 will be 45 minutes, 2 to 3 interviews. You will often have the choice to go in person, or you could do those on Zoom. There are 4 kinds of case interviews in general. Unless you have another case type that is prepped for you, we will be training you for the one-on-one case interview. And the one-on-one case interview trains you for digital presentation and group interviews as well. The one-on-one case interview is 95% plus of the interviews that you will have. It is you versus somebody inside the firm in a head-to-head matchup. And that head-to-head matchup is a dynamic one-on-one conversation. It is your job to demonstrate everything you know in a really short amount of time and to have fun doing it. The digital is a gamified process. It's kind of like the applied math portion of the GMAT. If any of you haven't taken that, that's kind of what you're prepping for. The presentation interview is where they give you data beforehand and then you present it to a group. They are super time intensive, both for the firm to evaluate and to create. And so firms, thank the Lord, have moved away from that this year. And then group interviews the same, right? It's hard to schedule, it's hard to coordinate, and it's also hard to evaluate. So like I mentioned, you will know if you do any one of the 3 bottom ones of these, the majority of your prep, our focus for you is going to be on the one-on-one interview. Just tell a coach immediately if you hear something different from any of the firms that you're applying for. So the first part is case interview openings. You're going to, of course, approach this with your coach, and those case interview openings are going to be all important. The case interview anatomy, the first 3 pieces are the background, the recap, and the case and objective clarification. Those first 3 parts are going to be mandatory, essential, and the great news about all 3 of these is that you really have to have very little original thought. Okay. There's a lot of patterning in them. You have up to 4 minutes to complete it. Many of your coaches, especially if you ask them, will use timing at the beginning of the case. I am looking more for the nature of how somebody opens the case rather than the content of how they open the case. I'm looking for confidence. I'm looking for speed. I'm looking for interactivity, right? I'm not necessarily looking for them to ask me the right question at the beginning of the case. So just to take some of the pressure off of you, one of the things that you can learn from are other people's experiences of opening cases. How do you demonstrate confidence? Number 1, in the background, and I'll just go through each one of these. In the background, your job is to take notes, smile while you're taking notes. Like, don't look like you are on murder trial. Okay. Number 2, when you are recapping, give me an introduction that has positive language in it. Something like, this sounds like a super interesting case, or I think I got everything. Let me just recap it to make sure, right? So something that kind of demonstrates that you know what you're doing and you understand the gamified process of the case. So when you're asking clarification questions, you want to ask advanced style of questions. And 2 things make them advanced. One is that they're the right kind of questions about what you missed, questions about the understanding of the business. Like, do you know what kind of way they operate or how they sell or who they sell to? Sometimes it's actually not clear in the background. And then clarity on the case objective. Like, what are you trying to do and how are you measuring that? All of those are going to help you build a more narrow, detailed, and specific structure. And the wording for all of those, the second piece is not just asking the right questions, but asking them in the right way. The wording for all of those always includes your hypothesis, right? What I think is this company seems like this company. Am I right? This company seems like they are a wholesaler, but they also have retail stores, like the example here. You're using a hypothesis-based approach so that somebody can respond to you in a yes or no fashion. Here are the no-nos with questions at the beginning. You don't ask questions before the recap. You don't ask me for new information. And you don't ask me whether or not there are other objectives for the business. There are always other objectives for every business. But you don't ask that kind of question inside MBB firms. You know that they're there. You don't ask them for them because it implies that you are there, therefore going to now include it in the scope of the problem that you're solving. You're not. You have 30 minutes, solve the case, right? Just focus on the key issues.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
We'll be right back after this quick break. We've worked with ballet dancers, doctors, teachers, engineers, and all other forms of underdogs to help them break into management consulting. And we'd love to help you do the same through our Black Belt Case Prep program. In Black Belt, you receive one-on-one mentorship and prep support from a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant, 8 hours in total. Your coach will develop a personalized plan for you and guide you through that plan via drill-based coaching sessions. Black Belt also includes resume and cover letter edits, because case prep is only so good if you don't get the interview. In addition, Black Belt gives you a digital suite of comprehensive training materials covering everything you need to know about management consulting recruiting. Last but not least, Black Belt gives you a private group training session on the fundamentals of consulting recruiting. 80% of Black Belt's land offers, which is why it's the world's most effective consulting prep program. If you're ready to quit wasting time in your prep process, join today. We've seen it all. Chances are we've already helped someone in your specific situation land a consulting offer. We regularly sell out our Black Belt cohorts, so check out the link in the show notes to grab your seat today.
Next two pieces of the case are the grand pause and the game plan. The grand pause and the game plan, you have 2 minutes each, ideally on the timeline, to complete each one of these. One of the things that we find is a big problem for people is that they create structures that are too weak. So if you feel like your structures are weak, ask your coach to time you. Usually you're using too little time and you feel like you're rushing because you feel like you're using up 2 minutes, but you actually have more time. And then when they time you, it'll give you the sense of like, I can keep going until the timer goes off. The biggest problem with the game plan when you're delivering your structure is that you deliver it in a fashion that is confusing and I cannot write it down. When I'm on Zoom, I want to be able to exactly mirror what you have written on your paper on mine. And somebody who does an awesome job of reading out their structure within 2 minutes explains, I have 4 categories, category A, B, C, and D. In category 1, I have 3 bullet points. Bullet point 1 is, bullet point 2 is, bullet point 3 is. They help me understand when I'm moving from an explanation of what a bullet point is to the next bullet point. And so that kind of really crisp and clean structure is an automatic differentiator inside your structure. It helps overcompensate for any issues of the kind of content inside your structure. So how you read it out is as important as what you put in your structure. You can evaluate the nature of a structure, whether somebody has a good quality structure at the beginning of the case, but whether it is a sufficient structure, whether it solved the case, I can only tell by the end. Right? So you can evaluate your structures twice. One is at the beginning of the case, like, hey, that took 2 minutes. It sounded and looked like a structure. It seems like it's got some really great content in it. There wasn't any overlap. It's super clear, but you can also evaluate it at the end. Your structure on your paper really should look like this. It has 4 categories. I generally recommend that you just write them down in the order they come out of your brain. And then at the end, you number them. Because even if you're using the profitability framework, you're going to write them down and you're going to be like, you know what the issue is in this case? It's volumes. That's the problem. And then you want to tell me not prices, volumes, variable costs, and fixed costs. You want to say volumes and then variable costs and then prices and then fixed costs, right? You want to drive me toward the things that are the highest priority. McKinsey in particular really likes this when you use a prioritization of your structures. Each of your structure areas will have data points underneath them. There are 3 to 4 data points that are ideal under each one of your categories. You can come up with a 3-part structure, but really 4 is best. These are the 10 kinds of case problems that we have inside the case library. I would recommend, and I put this on the end part of this, that as y'all are working through cases, your first 10 cases, you address one of each of these. Level 1 cases, which are for round 1, one of each of these types. If you do that, you're going to feel like you get a good survey of the business problems that you like to see. The orange ones are the ones that generally lend themselves to yes or no answers, or what we call the defined hypothesis from the previous slide. Okay. You can, when you are creating case interview buckets, you can mix and match and should mix and match. In general, the 2 buckets that I don't want to see inside any of our black belts categories are revenue or cost. I mean, literally, you might just want to put money as one of them. Like it's, right, you know, yes, we want to make more revenue. Yes, we want to reduce costs. It's kind of like a given. What we want to talk about are all of the levers by which we can change the revenue or the cost of a business. Okay. So revenue or cost are not valid buckets that you can or should use. You can use, and I also don't really like a financials bucket. We're talking about the levers of revenue, costs, and financials. And so stick to the ones on the outside of here or any other ones that can be practically applied. And then when you are creating advanced structures, you can go beyond the structures that are in our video case interview bootcamp that you're welcome to watch. The mix and match is where you can connect different categories together. Prioritization, I've already talked about. Every one of your data points underneath your categories need to be defined by a number. Every slide at McKinsey has a number attached to it. Every slide at Bain has a number attached to it. Even if it's the attrition rate of an HR organization, it always has a number attached to it. Think of the ways that you can measure something, not who are the competitors, but what percentage market share do the competitors have? Not what are the key reasons why employees stay, but what are the top 3 reasons why employees leave, right? Really defined, clear metrics. And then when in doubt, just be practical. You're running the company, what would you do? I want to now move on to case math. Case structure is probably the number one thing that people battle with. And that's why next week we're going to come back and we're going to do a 3-hour deep dive in our intensive on case structuring. So come to that live if you want to really practice the case structuring process. All of you are invited. It's included in Black Belt. So it's a free experience for you. If you can't make it, watch the video afterwards. The other piece, which is what we're going to do in August in the intensive, is case math. And case math is really just the focus on quantitative questions and creative questions. These quantitative questions are the bulk of the case math. There's 5 minutes. And the quantitative questions are led by the interviewer. They always, in every situation, come in with the data, with the exception of a market sizing question. The case math, your job is to break it down into different pieces, but a lot of people forget the most important thing, which is make sure you have the right information before you start calculating. So number 1, you'll want to recap what you need to do. Number 2, you'll tell me the algebra that you'll use. Number 3, you're going to focus on solving it, doing the mechanics of the math. And number 4 is hypothesizing the insights. Each one of these tie to an area of potential weakness. Recapping is really a volume of practice, right? Have you heard enough prompts and practice gathering the information? Structuring is understanding business formulas. Solving is understanding mental math, the mechanics of calculation. And insights is business information. That's where the industry primers can really help you. And so one of your jobs with your coach is to help figure out not just are you bad at math, but that you're bad at one part of math so that you can focus on that issue to really bulk up on that issue. For me, I was really I just didn't have a lot of business understanding, even though I did a business degree. So I wasn't able to drive to the insights effectively. So I was able to calculate fine. I had good math scores on my examples. I could do the algebra, but I didn't actually come up with the insights very well. And so help them push you on these areas. You can also do a self-diagnosis and go into your interviews with your coaches, telling them what you think is a weak area for you. And then the 3 insight levels. Level 1 is this is what the numbers say. Level 2 is here's the action the client should take. And level 3 is here's the next piece of analysis that we should do. And then on this page is all of the formulas that you need to know. We have the business formulas and the business basics boot camp that you can go through. So if you don't know, like if you're not like, oh, I understand how to calculate that or what the concepts are, go and do that boot camp on the platform. And that boot camp is going to help you just like bulk up so you feel like you're not going to get blindsided by a concept inside the cases. It's like an MBA in 3 hours, right? Not really, but it's good enough. The second to last piece is the case creative questions. These are brainstorming questions. And honestly, practicing for great structure at the beginning of the case helps you practice for brainstorming. The only exception here is that you are writing and talking at the same time. So whereas at the beginning, you ask for time to build your structure, inside the case creative process, you're going to write and talk simultaneously. So you'll still want to recap the background. You will build out the structure verbally. Then you will go back and you will add some data points to the structure. And then at the end, you'll tell them where you want to go first. And then they will generally ask you, what else do you want to do? They're pushing the boundaries of your creativity. Once you've practiced 5 of these, I think a lot of people feel like they get them down. So these are something that you can be immediately bad at, but the badness does not persist, just to encourage you. So if you haven't done 5 cases yet and you haven't done any drills on case creative, that's a really easy place to get a good win inside the case. Your structure will generally have 3 buckets. Here you need 2 data points per bucket or 3. You don't have to go into so much detail. And the last part is case closings. So the case closings at the end, and your first round can make a massive difference. It comes at the end of the case, but for Bain and for BCG, for example, they haven't scored you at all until this point. And so if you just like crush the case summary, I saw it a number of times, I would be like, oh, that person seemed like they were sleepy at the beginning, but they came on pretty strong at the end. So I think we should give them a second round. If you give up, you will definitely not pass the interview. So don't give up, just go for it, no matter what happens the rest of the interview. And if you want to cry, do it through your trembling voice, but just go for it, right? At the end. You're trying to, in under 2 minutes, explain what you recommend based on the data there. The worst case closings are non-closings. It's when people say, well, we don't have enough information and we didn't conclude anything and I don't know what we want to do next. The best ones say, we don't have a lot of information, but here's what I would do based on the information that we do have. Here's what we looked at, and this is what I would like to do next. Think of it as the end of an interim meeting, not the end of a project. Okay. So it's kind of like basically saying, here's where I've gotten to so far, and this is what I want to do next.
Thanks for tuning in to Strategy Simplified. Join Black Belt for one-on-one interview prep support, resume and cover letter edits, digital resources, and this amazing group training led by Jenny Ray LaRue. The next Black Belt cohort starts August 10th. And if you're at a partner program, if your school partners with Management Consultant for consulting prep resources, you get a discount on Black Belt. Write us for the code and to see if you are at a partner program. The email to write is team, T-E-A-M, @managementconsulted.com. We'd love to have you in the next cohort of Black Belt. Thank you again for listening. We'll catch you again next time.